Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third session for the Planets Workshop 2024. Today, we're looking at Mercury. I've got a little bit of tonsillitis, so I'm going to be a little croaky today at times, so I'm just putting that out there before we start. But we were just having the most interesting conversation before we started recording. We were talking about, gosh, social media. We were talking about end of times. We were talking about the energy of Pluto in Aquarius, where that seems to be leading us, and what's happening to us as a people. Then most interestingly, I think that came out of that is I think what we're seeing in the digital scape right now is both an indictment and a critique of the human condition at a given time. It's a mirror of who we are as a species, and it's changing so rapidly and so quickly, nobody knows where we're going. So that just felt like something really poignant before we started talking. But before we started recording, so today we'll be talking about Mercury. Just going through some of the topics we're going to go through today. It's going to be it's going to be lighter than the last one, that's for sure. But we're just going to look at the mythology like we always do. And there's a big three of mythology. Almost every pathos, every mythos across human history has had its Mercury figure. Whether it's Mercury as the messenger, whether it's Mercury as the teacher, whether it's Mercury as the agitator and troublemaker. Mercury has had a presence in almost every major mythos as we look back through history. We're going to take a look at Mercury also in the modern world, and it's out of all the planets I think that we're going to work through in this series. No planet is more connected to what we do in these groups, in these sessions as astrologers than Mercury. Mercury rules learning, it rules conversation and discussion. Mercury rules, if you remember right back to that very first session we did when we looked back at the sun, and before that, the history of astrology. In Hermeticism, astrology was formed and coalesced as a school of learning. And that's directly connected to Mercury and Thoth, those two gods. So as astrologers, as people who are communicating and interacting with one another on the digital scape as we are today, we're all disciples, we're all children of Mercury. Mercury, for us as a collective, is probably our patron god, if we have one. Yeah. So I thought I'd put that out there. We'll look at Mercury in signs. We'll look at Mercury in houses. We'll also look at Mercury, how to, just at face value, how to interpret, looking at easy and hard aspects. We'll have a look at Mercury retrograde, which is probably Mercury in its most famous. I don't know about you guys, but every time Mercury goes retrograde, and it happens about 3 times a year, I have catastrophic hardware or software failures. It happens every time. I'm either replacing a major part of my computer or I'm reinstalling Windows, reinstalling software, formatting, doing all of that stuff too. Used to get annoyed about it. There's just no point anymore. It happens, because it's bound to happen. It's just the time for it to happen. And I'm sure everybody's got their own interesting retrograde stories too. I know when you look at Facebook groups on astrology and things like that, as soon as Mercury goes retrograde, you know it, because everybody starts commenting. This has happened to me today. It's probably, it's just Mercury retrograde, So we'll have a look at that. We're also going to have a look at the end to different ways of manifesting and working with Mercury energy too. If you've got a retrograde Mercury on your chart, if you're a person who meditates or likes to physically manifest energy, there's some simple exercises and simple tools you can use to help work with Mercury too. So we're going to just touch on that today too. Does anybody have any questions so far? For a guy with tonsillitis, I'm doing a lot of talking right now. Okay. So this is, if we're looking at Mercury, and again too, you go through, you look at every mythos, you look at Hinduism, you look at Asian mythology and all of that, there's always a Mercury figure. And it's interesting to me when we talk about and look at Mercury on the astrology chart. For a lot of us, Mercury is interpreted as a minor player. It's the god of chatting endlessly about stuff, or it's, just something that's moving so quickly around the chart that it's barely really getting to express itself in one place at one time for too long. And in the mind of a lot of astrologers that I talk to and things like that, Mercury's sort of like a second string player, it's like one of those, a small character and things like that. But especially when I was going through and putting all of this content together, it's a tremendously important planet. It goes beyond just simple conversation, but beyond the way that the mind works. And when you look at the way that the energy of planets has evolved or not evolved over time, Mercury is a planet that's constantly reinventing itself and constantly striving and constantly on the bleeding edge of human consciousness. You know what I mean? So, and again, too, we're looking at these three gods when we look at that. Mercury, the original god. Also Hermes, hence Hermeticism. The ancient Greeks, when they due to the time of day, they thought that Mercury was two gods. They thought he was Hermes and Mercury because it appeared to them different depending on the time of day. It took them a while. They did realize it was exactly the same planet. But in the original, right back when the Greeks started paying attention to planets, they thought that Mercury was two completely different entities. And when you look at the duality that's inherent in Mercury, that probably had a lot to do with their perception of it. While their manifestos were similar, they had distinct differences in some areas as well. They were two separate entities. And that's something that we've always assigned to Mercury is duality. He was the messenger of the gods, which everyone's familiar with. He's also the god of commerce. So any form of trade, anything to do with exchanges of money, exchanges of energy, anything where two people are bargaining, swapping, negotiating, where one party is probably exploiting another party and we're seeing so much of that these days. Mercury's involved. And that way Mercury's got as much to do with the word no as it does with the word yes. He's also the god of thieves. So any duplicity, any act of stealing off another person, of leveraging, of misdirecting, of deceit, it all is part and parcel of Mercury. He's the god of travelers. So if you're going from one place to another, and that makes sense too, he moves so quickly. His feet barely touched the ground. He was the fastest of the gods. Anything to do with travel, whether it's a map, whether it's a GPS, whether it's a compass, all of that sort of stuff, that falls under the purvey of Mercury too. So if you're somebody who travels a lot and that Mercury retrograde comes around, you're more likely to be stuck at the station or be delayed, or your flight plans go chaotic, or lose your luggage probably at that time than another. And Mercury was also a psychopomp. He is one of those gods or deities who ushered souls to and from different planes, especially to the underworld. He is one of the gods who could easily move between different worlds. So like Hecate, the goddess of the moon, he also was able to go to and from the underworld, to lead souls to and from the underworld. I think he's connected to Persephone. I can't remember off the top of my head. From that point of view, he had a lot of involvement from that angle as well. Now, when we look at Loki, you look at Loki, he's enjoyed a massive reboot right now of the whole Marvel franchise. But he was the god of cunning, which I guess ties in with that deception, the god of thieves and so on. So cunning and deception fell under him. Transformation, changing from one state to another. Fluidity, that was connected to Loki too. Loki was an agent of instability, and the Vikings, the worshippers of Loki, they saw instability and chaos as an important agent in change and progression, and Loki represented that. It was interesting when you read some of the fables. I think who was it? Balder, who was the most beloved of the gods in Norse mythology, was indirectly killed by Loki. He was immune to almost every type of weapon you could use against him. And they used to have events where he'd stand there and everybody would beat on him with hammers and swords and things like that, and nothing would happen. Loki goes to an old blind god, I think it was Helmer at the time, and he gives him a spear. I think it's made out of mistletoe, which is the Balder's only weakness. Um, Helmer throws the spear, it goes straight through Balder, and he's killed, the most beloved of the gods. All the other gods loved him. And when they interrogated Loki after, when they traced it back to him, which probably didn't take long because he was always at the center of this sort of stuff, all he had to say was basically, this is what I do. There was nothing malicious about it. There was no evil intention in it. He is an agent of chaos and anarchy. And he was simply being true to his script. That was his role in heaven. He's the god of shapeshifters. And again, too, this is leaning into the duality or the multi-state of Mercury. When we look at our third god, we're looking at Thoth. Thoth is such an interesting god. Out of all the gods in the old world, he's one of the most hybridized. When you get to around the 14th dynasty in Egypt, you start to see references to Thoth, Amon, Ra, all these other hybrid gods started coming in, and they were immensely political, these gods. And a lot of them, they were for about consolidating power for religious factions and groups. But Thoth was always involved. He was not in the planning stage, not in the manipulation or the manifesting stage of coups or overthrows or things like that, but because credentially he was so important and so revered and so relevant to the consciousness of the times, you put Thoth as a stamp on anything and it immediately gets respect. He's the god of scribes, so anything that writes, in any form of writing that we do, any form of, if we're typing on a keyboard or any form, even audio recording, I guess now, it's become the new scribing system. If you're a blogger, all of that sort of stuff, then Thoth is involved. He's the god of knowledge, magic, mathematics, all of that sort of stuff. He's the god of language. So, and probably when you look back through time, you go back to Babylon, which is credited as being the first true human civilization. A lot of the things that consolidated Mesopotamia and Babylon as a superpower were their ability to write and to scribe. They created the first set of laws. They created a code that others could live by. And this is all Mercury stuff. This is all Thoth stuff. They had their own god. I think it was Nabu, who presided over all of this sort of stuff. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. Thoth was also the god of balance. And it's interesting when you contrast him with Loki, who's the god of chaos, absolute unabashed chaos as well. They all share a common theme, but at the same time, they're almost, what's the word I'm looking for? They're almost bipolar when you put their combined resumes together. There's such a contrast and there's such a scope and such a range in the way that these gods express themselves. And they're parts of human consciousness and human civilization and development that they preside over. It's such a broad resume between them. Does anybody have any thoughts or anything they want to add to that? Because there's quite a lot dumped down there straight away.
Did you say Thoth was involved in math also?
Yes, god of mathematics.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes hand in hand with the scribing, the writing. He was an architect in so many respects. So, and at the same time too, in a lot of ways, he was a dispassionate observer as well, an incredible God, I think. And again, too, when you go back to Hermeticism, where astrology was first coalesced and created, Thoth and Mercury, or Hermes, are the two gods who were invoked and called upon, and whose energy we in teachings we use to create what's brought us here today. And the way that we're discussing it and communicating it and learning and engaging. So it's all tied into that. And it's fascinating to think we're sitting here involved in a dialogue that's 8,000 years old now. and we're continuing
This
that
is
path,
very,
isn't it?
yeah,
It's
that's
it's
very cool.
yeah, it's very, very cool. And that's in a way, like I said before, a lot of people sort of look at Mercury as being a minor player when it comes to astrology. When it comes to human consciousness, love, when you look at love, you look at Venus, love changes over the course of lifetime, but the basic ingredients of love stay the same. It's about how we experience love that changes over the course of a lifetime. You look at Mars, his manifest at the end of the day, when you look at it at a visceral sort of gut level, is pretty adrenaline driven and basic. It's the most basic human emotions and things like that. It doesn't evolve a lot. But you look at Mercury, and you look at the evolution of Mercury, you look at the evolution of astrology, because it keeps reinventing and reinventing itself and improving. Um, there was a fear, I remember, around the 70s or 80s that astrology was going to die out, but it's stronger now than it's ever been. But it's so radically evolved now. It's so different from what it was back when people were doing charts by hand and doing exams, before they could claim the right to even look at another person's chart and all of this sort of stuff. And again, too, we were talking about crystallization of forms. We're seeing an age now where that's all being bypassed. It's just too slow doing things that way now. We're so locked in a Mercury age right now. So, but the point I'm trying to make is, out of all of the planets, the big evolver is probably Mercury. Uranus is always involved too. Uranus generally is when the big change happens, but Mercury is the one who's there, writing it down while it's happening, and doing it by design and living it, and becoming a part of it. You know. So I just thought I'd put that out there. Does anybody else have any other thoughts too they want to add to that? I find these three cards so fascinating. Yeah. Okay. In the modern world, Mercury rules digital media. Look, it's all digital media now. I don't think there's anything more Mercury than Reels, and TikTok. Um, and it's coming content that comes and goes. It goes viral for a while, disappears. We were talking about it too. What makes it viral is all the eyes that are on it, and they're only on very, very briefly. I look at Mercury. If you were looking at Mercury as being a part in a computer, it would be RAM. It would be the random access memory. It's the part that holds a whole bunch of instructions, predicts what you might do next, and then prepares for that. But then lets it all go as soon as it's done. It's got no backward memory. You know what I mean? It's not a hard drive or anything like that. It doesn't store anything. It stores just enough to get to the next stop. And beyond that, we've got multi-threaded technology now. It's 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of where you might be at any given time. So, and that's digital media in a lot of ways too. It's an animal that's grown out of control. I remember, God, when the internet first started really making an impact back in the 90s, and I remember everybody saying, "Oh God, no, this isn't going to catch on." Even major companies and CEOs are saying, "Ah, this is all rubbish." Same way they were about AI about 2, 3 months ago. And the radical evolution we've seen in how quickly internet technology has evolved has not only taken on a new form, it's become an integral part of our lives now. It's almost impossible to live without internet now. Even simple functions like banking or communicating and things like that, it's all done digitally now. So, and the speed of the internet and the file size and things like that, they're the two determining factors on how effective digital media are. And they're both connected to Mercury, you know. Um, like I said, Uranus will be the breakthrough, but Mercury will be the superhighway that data travels along, and that scape is changing all the time. Gadgets, all these technical gadgets. Man, this is an age of gadgets. Who's brought stuff off Temu before? Anybody? Okay, cool. Me, I have. Man, I can lose myself on that site for hours. As a guy who loves gadgets, that's probably the best,
Mm-hmm.
one of the best places to go, and it's also dirt cheap. God, I don't know if it's good, but I haven't been disappointed by the stuff I've bought so far. If I'm ever going to make an impulse buy, it's going to be gadgets. That's my weakness. So,
So yeah,
my birthday's coming up, and God knows how many months too, folks. I'm just putting that out there. So, but yeah, gadgets, technical gadgets, gadgets and digital media now go hand in hand. We've got all these gadgets. You go to Kickstarter, you go to Indiegogo, the amount of gadgets that have been kicked off at the moment are astonishing too. And again, these are on digital media platforms. Commerce, any form of trade, any form of exchange. We talked about that before when we looked at Mercury. That's all ruled by Mercury as well. Retail and e-commerce, man, what an evolution that's taken in the last, God, especially the last 20 years. It's amazing. I was a web designer right back around 2000. I was making money hand over fist over companies that were convinced they were going to put a website up, they were going to create an e-commerce platform and just double their retail magically somehow, double their revenue stream. And that was the big dot-com crash, I think, happened around 2001, 2002, when everybody realized that this was not the way. The companies that survived that were the ones who did the research, looked at the figures and thought about the way they did business, took a step back. Procter and Gamble were an excellent example. They had an incredible website that they'd built up and they'd expected to double their revenue. Didn't happen. They shut the bones of the website down and just kept a presence up. But then what they did was they changed their website to research and development. People could come, sign up, and they'd send products out to the market. And people could test these products and give them feedback about it. What it did for their research and development was incredible. It was such a massive step up from what they were doing before. They were reaching so many people. But by the time a product had been finalized and was ready to put out on the market, they already had a whole bunch of people who were familiar with it. They'd tested it. And were ready for it once it hit the shelves. And then they reintroduced e-commerce, and that's when they started making money. Back then, the only people who were making money, I think, were Amway and Dell. Everybody else was losing money. But as they stepped back and reevaluated, they actually developed web strategies rather than just building web stores. That's when the money started rolling in, and that's when the internet started evolving. So that's something that falls under Mercury as well. Bitcoin, I don't think there's anything more serves as a better example of Mercury at work than Bitcoin. It goes up, it goes down. It's based on speculation. It's like it's like stock trading in so many ways from the little bit that I understand. And it's completely software driven now with, your blockchain technologies and all this other stuff that's happening. Up in the mall where I am now, there's a machine there. You can go and buy Bitcoin. You can buy, digital currency. You spend your money and you buy virtual coins and stuff like that. It's evolving so quickly, that's all connected to Mercury. It rules online learning, and here we are. It's online learning that's brought us all together. So again, too, if we have a patron god, it's definitely Mercury. I know he's mine. It rules marketing, search engine optimization, search engine marketing, all of that sort of stuff too, which again too is driving the digital scape right now. This is how the competition online is fought. It's using these tools. Mercury rules writers and authors. If you're a blogger, if you're a writer, an author, if you're writing your memoirs, all of that sort of stuff, that all falls under Mercury. Arts and music, he's the patron of both. So that falls under it. And again, too, when you look at this resume, it's a really big resume. It's really super relevant. And finally, Mercury rules AI. Again, too, I think the big breakthroughs that happen again are brought about by Uranus. But Uranus is like aircraft in the military. It can go, it can bomb the hell out of a target, but it cannot hold ground. And Mercury is what happens after. It's the transformation that happens. It's the evolution. It's the evolution that leads us to the next Uranus moment. We tend to peg Uranus as the driving force behind technology and stuff like that. In my mind, Uranus is more about quantum leaps and evolutions in technology that change the way we do stuff. You see famous people, especially athletes, and people say, oh, wow, that guy's so lucky to get so famous. And inevitably, when they're interviewed, what you don't hear about is all the hard work they've done to get them to that point. You know what I mean? And in a way, I look at Mercury as the hard work. It's all the change, it's all the micro corrections, it's all the papers that have been released. It's the technology, the schematics, the blueprints, the gadgets, all of that stuff, the discussions, the board meetings, the financiers getting involved, investors, all of that sort of stuff. These things don't happen all by themselves, these big changes. And they tend to really, really get big when so much energy is focused on them all at the same time and they're growing incredibly quickly. And then all of a sudden Uranus steps in and it's like Steve Jobs turning up and saying, yeah, we made this big change and stuff. And you don't see all those little scientists that have been sort of struggling under the load of what Steve Jobs had given them to do, That's Uranus, in a lot of ways, probably the best example of that relationship. AI is the big one right now. Even a month ago, I was seeing articles online where people were saying, well, AI is disappointing and it's not going to, it doesn't work the way that we thought it would and things like this. The stuff I'm seeing online now is apocalyptic. People are saying that they think AI is going to be the end of us. The whole discussion on AI is happening very, very quickly, and it's evolving as quickly as the technology is. Is anybody here using like ChatGPT or Midjourney or any AIs, anything like that?
I do. I use the Chat
I do.
GPT.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's incredible. We're up to version 4 now. It's evolving so
Yeah.
quickly.
You
My
know,
wife. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's funny that I'm glad that you have brought up the whole Mercury thing, because when I first jumped into astrology, Mercury was about learning and stuff, and then the internet, and then somehow Uranus did take over. So I kind of forgot that Mercury was even associated with the internet and stuff. I always go right to Uranus. So I'm glad that you brought that point up.
Yeah. I believe it's the evolution of all of that stuff. These technological breakthroughs aren't happening by themselves. There is an evolution that's working tirelessly and anonymously behind that's delivering people to that stage. So, and AI is just an extension of that too. And it's funny how threatening those two letters are to the human psyche. You talk about AI now, everybody thinks about Skynet, with the Terminator and things like that. And there's somehow this belief that when computers become self-aware, they're going to see us for the great big arseholes that we really are and wipe us out. That seems to be the prevailing science fiction narrative of astrology, not astrology, of AI and things like that. But at the end of the day, if AI is becoming more and more like us, I think it suddenly becomes more capable of doing stupid counterintuitive things, making the same mistake again and again and again, not because it doesn't know better, but probably because it does know better, consciously again and again making the worst choice for yourself when so many better options are available. That's how humans think, and if AI is going to do that, then God, I'd feel sorry for it personally, good luck with that, let's see what you come back with. But we're here. We'll see what's happening. There's some scientists right now predicting that it's going to have an apocalyptic effect. I went to a really interesting talk a while ago where a science team at a major university were talking about AI. I think a person had just been run over by a car that was AI driven, a completely AI driven car. And the whole debate was around ethics and AI. How do we program ethics into AI? I don't understand how we've forgotten somehow at the end of the day, those ethics are all bound to the person who either writes that code or pays that code writer's wage. At the end of the day, it's like anything digital. It's just a reflection of us, So anyway, does anybody else have anything they want to add? Anything that might be missed on that list, or any questions you might have, or?
I just wanted to add something that might sound funny, like like Mercury could be the Wi-Fi of the gods also, because like since he's connected to Mercury, and Mercury is the messenger. Like I wrote down, I said he's the voice of the ancestors, because he can go down to Hades and go up to the sky also. So he's like the old time channeling before we got Wi-Fi.
That's right. You know what? And you're absolutely right, because at the end of the day, the message he's delivering to gods or deities or titans or human beings or whoever it is, it's not his message, it's somebody else's. So, and that I think also ties into his nature as a psychopomp, someone who can travel between worlds and move things between
Exactly.
worlds. You know what I mean? And
And
it's not his own will that drives him. He's there as an ambassador for somebody else, as a representative. And he enjoys that special sort of protection that messengers always have had throughout history, throughout wartime, where you could send a messenger from one kingdom to another, and there's a 90% chance that messenger's going to come home because he's no threat to anybody. You start killing messengers, you start losing that
don't be
dialogue.
the messenger.
Exactly,
Right.
don't shoot the messenger. So and that what a privileged position that is, you know. So, and again, I reassert, and it just, again, too, like when I was putting this all together, it just blew me away just how important this little planet is. You know, at some stage, his shadow probably hits every planet in the solar system, because he's the closest thing to the sun.
Can I add something to that as
Yes.
well?
Yep.
Just I've always felt this because Mercury is my chart ruler, and I've always been like so fascinated in learning and just different subjects.
Mm.
And my anytime a relative passes away, I somehow receive, this feels like a safe space to share this, but I do receive a message in some way through like a very intense and vivid dream, or a like alert on my phone, where I've actually, the night that my grandmother passed away, I was sleeping in her bed actually, and my phone was going off nonstop from an unknown number. And then we tried to like do research and figure out, where it was coming from, and it was basically unknown. So I've always like equated that to kind of my, Mercury kind of being my ruler and also delivering me messages from relatives.
I think Michael told me yesterday we were going to be looking at your chart soon. Is that correct? I am fascinated to see
Yes.
how that connects in with what you've just said. I can feel like the bones of it are all going to be there. Yeah, and yeah, you're in a good space for talking about exactly that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have probably had similar experiences that's brought us all together. So thanks for sharing that. And I couldn't think of a clearer example of Mercury. I think you're certainly the messenger there. Yeah, the conduit. Yeah. Mercury in a sign. Okay. And this ties into exactly what we were talking about before. Mercury, when you work with Mercury on a chart, it's connective. It's a conduit. In some ways, it's an accelerator. When you connect two planets together and Mercury or more, and Mercury's involved in there somehow, it tends to accelerate and excite that entire process. It puts speed, it puts spin, injects electricity into it too. Depending, of course, on the placement. If it's in its fall or its detriment and things like that, it can express in a different way. But again, too, it's interesting that, I mean, Mercury is considered how we think in so many ways. But when you step back and ask what the thinking process is, generally it's a connective process. One of the superpowers of human beings that's allowed us to rise up to the privileged stage we're in right now is pattern recognition. We're one of the animals on the earth that is excellent at looking at different things and building relationships, a relational model in our head of how those things can go together. That's manifested as tools, as technology, as development, as planning and talking, the creation of language. It's interesting to me that for Chinese is probably one of the oldest languages in the world, yet it doesn't really have a strong model for distinguishing the past, the present, and the future. It's not something that's easily conveyed using Chinese language. So, and where that affects, undoubtedly that affects the consciousness of the people that speak that particular language. So in a way, and the point I'm trying to make is the ability for nations to rise and probably the cause of many nations to fall has had a lot to do with their ability to transmit and share ideas. The more efficient, the more clear and valid those ideas are when they're expressed in the most succinct way possible, the more efficient and the faster the languages, the countries tend to develop. You look at the German language, I think it's credited as having the least amount of words out of any of the Western languages. So, you know, and a lot of the German people you meet, they are straight to the point. And things like that. And that's connected directly to the consciousness of the people. So how they express themselves, the tools they choose to use, is a reflection of the disposition of the people that do it. Perhaps languages that have a lot more nuanced ways of discussing things are languages of diplomats. I think Arabic is one of those. You know, and it's a very nuanced and a very subtle language, and there's a lot of different meanings. So it's a good diplomat's language. It's a good language for perhaps for deceit, and things like that. It's an evolved language. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying that without putting it out there that Arabic people are deceitful. I'm not. But it's a language in a way that's prepositioned to do that. The English language, I think, has more words than any other language in the world. And at the end of the day, almost all of them are borrowed. You know, we've taken from different languages. We've taken from different times in history. One of the topics that comes up again and again is you can have one goose and multiple geese, but how come you can't have one moose and multiple meese? And my understanding is goose and geese is a Germanic word. It's an old word. It's been around for a long time. It's had a lot of use. But the word moose, from what I understanding, is tied to the Eskimos of the northern tribes. I don't see a lot of them standing around together, and their languages in a lot of ways have not evolved the same ways that other ones have. But English will take them anyway. They don't care. You know what I mean? So they'll grab whatever they can. They'll stick it in the language. My wife, English for her is a third language, and it's an absolute struggle. And she's so thrilled professionally to find ChatGPT, which does all the heavy lifting for her when it comes to writing emails and sending reports and all of that sort of stuff. Then people meet her and talk to her, and she can confuse them, or she gets confused. But the English language is probably the most convoluted and borrowed language there is. Words come in a fashion, they come out of fashion. You can have one word, or at least the sound of a word, that has 3 or 4 completely different meanings that are unrelated. You know, it's a nightmare for people learning English from that point of view. So Mercury is connective. It's also connected to communication, how we communicate with one another, and also with languages. We discussed that before. Mercury rules thought processes. So how we think is important. Generally, it tends to fall into 4 categories, and then we're just talking at variations on that category. We've got air thinkers, we've got earth thinkers, we've got fire thinkers, and we've got water thinkers. Do we have any earth thinkers here? Anybody who's got Mercury in an earth sign? How's that expressing for you? How does that work for you, Gianna?
I can be very like bullheaded when I'm trying to make a point about something, even though I am very fluid and very open-minded. Sometimes the way I express myself actually sounds the opposite, which is
Okay.
not my intention. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's interesting. And when you say that too, is your thinking eclectic and connective, or is it methodical and step-by-step approach to approaching problems and discussion and things like that?
I find myself just having a very grounded and practical approach to solving a problem or just accomplishing something.
Yeah.
Whereas, and so but then my air energy comes in and it kind of can distract me from what I already know is, needs to be done.
Sure, sure. And when you're saying that, your hands going step by step by step by step. So that's classic Mercury and an earth sign sort of takeaway there. Do we have any water thinkers? Anybody with Mercury in a water sign? Okay. classically, Mercury and the water sign tend to be more intuitive thinkers. Their thoughts can be driven by what they feel, though, and what they're feeling at a given time, how they feel in a particular situation. People who trust their instincts, people who trust their intuition and their initiative and things like that too. That can be connected to water thinking. It's not uncommon for them to say one thing and then say something completely different later. And for them, both answers are correct. Air thinkers, do we have an air thinker in the group? How does that work for you, Michael? I say that already knowing. Have you
Well, I mean, like I mentioned before, I tend to overthink really a lot. My air is in Aquarius next to my, I mean, my Mercury is in Aquarius in the fourth house next to my sun. So I think a lot, and like I said, I overthink. I go down rabbit holes a lot.
Okay,
It's
cool.
fun. I like to research. I like to create, essays and PowerPoints and stuff like that to get my point across. When I was a teenager, I used to do like a PowerPoint for my dad. When I'd want to do something, I'd present everything to him. And that way, if he had any questions at the end, I usually try to do a frequently asked questions section, things that I thought he might ask me. So that's how my Mercury's played out. It's just made me, I like, I'm I like to communicate. I like to get everything kind of out there and everybody on the same page, I guess.
Great, great. I'm a Mercury and Aquarius as well in the eighth house. For me, I'm fascinated by hidden stuff, fascinated by motivations for other people and things like that. I'm always paying attention to what people say, what people do, what people are hiding. I'm particularly fascinated by, but I'm not emotionally invested in at the same time. Really, it's like researching and studying back and looking at what people do. Yeah, so I'm an air thinker too, and it tends to happen quick, and it tends to be very, very connected when it happens as well. Gemini thinkers, I think everybody's met a Gemini Mercury at some point in my life, and my God, aren't they amazing? The what's the word I'm looking for? The agility of the Gemini thinker and talker. They are the stuff of legend. So yeah, do we have any Mercury and fire signs?
Me, guilty.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about it, Crystal.
Oh, okay. So my Mercury is in Leo, which is my sun and my rising.
Okay.
I have thousands of thoughts, very impulsive thoughts. I'm very optimistic. I can think of 1,000 ways to do something and break down everything. Very diplomatic. It's crazy because I feel like it's a little air and fire. When I think of the way I think, my thoughts, but I think big at the same time. Like it's always a huge picture. I can always see the bigger picture and everything. Impulsive. Like I have the racing thoughts all the time. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I could pull out 5 things and then be like, I don't feel like doing that right now. And then, so
Yeah.
I don't know.
Did anybody
Yeah.
feel their heart rate go up when Crystal was talking? You're so passionate about what you're talking about, and I could feel my heartbeat going fired up and stuff like that too. There's a lot of air. Yeah, isn't it amazing? It's very, very uplifting. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of air in the way you communicate and things like that, but man, you get a passion and a fire in it too. And I always
Yeah.
enjoy that in the groups. So it's something that you bring.
Thank you.
So that's what I'm saying, where your Mercury lands, the sign that it's in and the element of that sign often has an impact on the way that you think. And I think we already know that as well. But even just in the space of this one little conversation when we're talking about it and finding different ways to express it, we see people expressing body language with what they do with their hands. We feel changes in our own body language when we listen to other people talking about their Mercury and things like that too. It's again, it goes right back to that first point for me. Mercury is connected. The way we express our Mercury dictates and impacts the way that we connect with other people, not just ourselves. And I literally did feel my heart rate go up and my mind start speeding up when Crystal was talking to match the cadence and the way that she expresses herself. And I enjoy that. That for me, that's that's an amazing way of expressing. It's infectious. as Mercury should be in so many ways. You hear Mercury and Capricorn people sometimes talk, and you feel your face going to sleep. You know, things like that. And different signs, you can go down the list. You know, you're trying not to. You're thinking about other stuff all of a sudden, you know, and you
Yeah.
realizing you're not as disciplined, not even nearly as disciplined as you need to be, things like that. And then
Yeah.
you hear somebody from Pisces just talking about anything and everything that comes into their head, you know, whether it's from their own head or somebody else's head, it's all coming out there too. I generalize, you know, I'm probably going to get, when we put this on YouTube, we're probably going to get some haters for this section, but hey, that's the digital landscape, isn't it? Yeah. I'm ready for that. I'm ready to be cancelled.
No, but that's true. That's true, yeah, because Mercury
I'm not afraid.
could be thinking anything.
Oh, hey, you know, anything that's going to get eyes at us, they've got to look at us first to cancel us, and I'm ready for that traffic. Um, so your learning style and your education, the way your education expresses through you. I'm still astonished. At my age, I still am parroting and emulating a lot of the things I learned at school, a lot of the things that I learned when I was a kid. A lot of that stuff you learn, it goes under the threshold of your consciousness. You don't think about it because it was introduced to you at an age before you really had the time to process whether it was yours or not. But that being said, I've made such a big deal about how transient Mercury energy can be. But at the end of the day, the roots of how Mercury expresses through us is defining in so many ways. Our learning style, how we learn in a particular environment. I'm an Aquarius, but my learning style is very connective and eclectic. My superpower is probably research. You know, when I'm doing a course or I'm learning something like that, I probably, in my mind, I'm carrying around maybe 60% of the knowledge that I need to do something, and I'll get the other 40% from learning and researching. But everybody else has their own style. People with a fire Mercuries tend to be kinesthetic. We've got three basic styles at the very least. We're either high audio, high visual, or we're kinesthetic. And fire Mercuries tend to be kinesthetic. They learn by doing stuff. They've got to be out there, and once they do it and they feel their body doing it, the mind follows. You know, water Mercury, they tend to be reflective. Their learning style. How do I feel about this? How do I feel while I'm doing this? How do I feel about the result of that? Is this right for me? And things like that. So the learning style is tied to that. The type of education that we gravitate towards can often be determined from our Mercury. One thing that astonishes me so often is when we do these groups, there are so many fire signs and so many air signs who tend to come and to be part of these groups when we talk online and stuff. But maybe at the end of the day, my delivery style is better suited for fire and for air signs, you know. So we don't see a lot of water signs a lot of the time coming in, you know, with really, really powerful water placements on their chart. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, and you've got your finger on the pulse of that. But we don't, you know, and maybe right from the gate, I'm the first person they see, and, you know, if that isn't resonating with you, then that's probably the case. Probably the worst feedback I get on Udemy is from feeling people, you know, and I'm okay with that. How we organize information in our mind. Earth signs, it's pedantic, structured, follows a course. Air signs can go in any direction. We've already sort of talked about this, but how we organize information in our mind. Like I said, one of the superpowers of the human race has been our ability to create connections. To pattern recognition is a really, really important part of us. And how we organize information is based directly on pattern recognition and us being able to sort out things. People with poorly placed Mercuries can really, really struggle with this. They can really struggle with instructions. They can really struggle with seeing progressions or how things are connected together. So you know what I mean? And if your clients come to you and they're having these sorts of problems, then this is clearly where you need to go straight up off the bat. So how adaptable are we? Are we able to adapt to new problems, new situations? When the market changes, where the situation changes, are we able to go with the changes, or are we left struggling or angry, or, you know, feeling disconnected at that particular moment? Are we able to take advantage of new opportunities? Are we even able to see new opportunities? This is all connected to Mercury. Oh, actually, going back to that, I was listening to a talk about upward and downward opportunities in the past, and there was a time when cars first started coming out, and people were going to horse and cart manufacturers trying to get them on board to make cars. Some of them, and at the time, the look of cars, they looked like a ridiculous product. You needed somebody walking in front of a car with a flag. They weren't allowed to go over a certain speed. They tended to break down. They needed fuel all the time. Anybody who had a horse and cart business, the car looked like the worst investment you could make. Absolutely did. And so a lot of them refused straight up and they just thought about better ways to improve the style that they had. And I think the other companies that saw the potential for that, where they had to see the long-term potential, because all of the data in front of them right now looked bad compared to what they already had. But there were companies that made that transition, and now they're the dominant force. And that, again, sees the difference between an upward and a downward opportunity. And that's connected to how adaptable we are, how we're able to see the big picture. And Mercury's got everything to do with that. Puzzles and problem solving, that's connected to Mercury. And our relationship with money, that's a big one. That's a defining one for everybody, I think. As astrologers, that money and love, they tend to be the two. Money, love, and career, they tend to be the three biggest questions that we get when people come in and talk to us. So our relationship with money, that's so much governed. There's an emotional connection to it, but there's definitely a Mercury connection in there too. Does anybody have anything they want to add to this? Or any insights, experiences?
We dive into that, our relationship with money bit, because I've never heard that in connection to Mercury before.
Okay. Mercury's the god of commerce, god of trade, god of exchanges. Yeah. So our relationship with money, a lot of it's connected with that, how money comes and goes, through our lives and stuff. We tend to look at the second house, but if you're looking for a planet directly connected to commerce, trade, the transactional side of money, how we earn money from other people, how we give money to other people, all of that sort of stuff, a lot of that's connected directly to Mercury. Yeah.
Thank you.
I got something to say. So I was doing my sister's chart, and it took me a while to connect the few things, and it's crazy because I realize now. So she wanted to know her career and stuff. Now the girl got her CDLs and everything. I don't know how I didn't connect this, but she's a Virgo rising with Mercury. So it took me a while to realize that, and she has a Gemini in her 10th house. Okay. So it took me a while to realize she was doing just what her chart kind of said she was going to do, because it was hard for me to connect Mercury to driving. And I don't know how I missed that when it's about travel. Yeah. That would be right? Mercury would have,
absolutely.
It could be a truck driver. Okay.
Yeah. Again, too, you see, a lot of the time, too, when we're looking at the houses, tend to be the formal places where we look at these things. But the houses talk about a part of our lives, but the planets are how we experience them. And where those parts, you look at a house, you might look at a house that's talking about one thing, but when we want to see how that's manifesting, we tend to go look for the ruler. But this is a common thing I see with a lot of charts. People who do interpretations for the Introduction to Astrology course, and they do that last exercise with Robert's Heartbreak. I don't know if anybody remembers that. But people tend to look at the houses for meaning. But the planets all carry their own meaning as well, and they tell us the parts of our lives where that can express. So you know what I mean? And that's probably, especially for learner astrologists, it's the most overlooked part. But at the same time too, you know what I mean? I think for a lot of the advanced stuff, we forget that too. I know I forget it for some planets.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. We all tend to gravitate towards our own learning style. But again, to see, this is why I wanted to do this, these workshops and things like that, because in a way I think, and this is why the mythology is so important to me. I think when you start understanding the mythology, the why of why these gods were assigned what they have, or their manifestos were organized the way that they were, you understand the intention of the originators of astrology, if you like. And at the end of the day, we've managed to dissolve a lot of this down to a series of key words and things like that. But there's a definite intention that's driving most of these gods. And we're talking about a major evolution. We're talking about thousands of years of it. We're just scratching the surface of it when we're looking at keywords and things like that too. So again, to the next one, Venus, I'm really interested, I'm really passionate about. I think when you go back to classical mythology, when you go back to classical literature, the image of Venus in the classical world is so different to the way that we use Venus now. In esoteric astrology, Venus is the arbiter of wisdom. And a lot of us don't assign that to Venus, other than the fact, you have a heartbreak and enough times you've got to wise up at some point. I think that tends to be wisdom for us in the modern age. But yeah, wisdom is part of Venus's manifest as well. And I'm looking forward to exploring that. So, just getting back to what you said, Crystal, yeah, travel, definitely, if travel's a part of it, but also how money, the way money moves through your life, and money, out of all the things in our lives, comes and goes. That's Mercury energy. That's defining Mercury energy. Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
That was very helpful for me, because I was looking at a chart today that had Sun, Mercury, and Mars in the second house.
Wow. Okay.
In Gemini. So
yeah.
So I was thinking, how does that work? But I get it now. Yet all they can think about is that, and the talents they have. They're always thinking about that, thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
And the value of things, and calculating.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Very interesting that it. What a coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah. My Mercury's in the 8th house, so money for me is very transactional from other people. It's connected to other people. I've got a whole bunch of internal stuff I work through with money, which seems to be a common thread for a lot of us too. We're in this grey area between ethics and profit. There seems to be a whole wasteland in between the two of them. But for me, I think it goes deeper than that too. And my relationship with money has always been quite volatile. So yeah. Yeah, and that's my Mercury. I've got no doubt about it. No doubt at all. Mercury in a house. So identify the house theme. That's easy. We know our 12 houses. We know what they all stand for. Although every once in a while you find a source. Maybe like today, you look at something and somebody's assigning something that you didn't see before or you didn't think of before, because there's a surface level that we look at it with every house. So identify the house theme, and then we look at Mercury and we take the way that we think, all the stuff we talked about previously. Are we an earth thinker? Are we a water thinker? And things like that. Our relationships with other people, how we connect things together. And this is really interesting, especially for signs in their Mercury's in their detriment, because Mercury in its detriment can work well, can work extremely powerfully, but it can be in the wrong house and the wrong sign. And that can become a major disruptor in our lives. You know what I mean? And that, I don't know, maybe that's, for some people, you're looking at an extreme example, that could be the seed of mental illness or something like that, a cognitive dissonance between the way the person thinks and connects with the world and organizes their thoughts and the way they structure their reality in their mind and what they see happening in the world and how they're experiencing the world around them and things like that. So this is something I want to explore later on too. I had always had that as a goal. I wanted to work through looking at depression, anxiety, all of those sort of things, and looking for all the astrology markers and creating some content for that and putting it up online. It just always seemed to get waylaid into other things. But Mercury's in there for sure. That's definitely going to be a big factor in there too. So identify the house theme. If Mercury's extremely well placed, then the person could be a diplomat. They could be a person whose mind works so quickly, and they seem to have that golden touch. Everything that they think about, everything that they are able to manifest or discuss or bring out into the world, or is able to drive their negotiations with other people and things like that. While somebody where their Mercury is in a house where it's not well placed can have a completely different experience. Look at the ruling sign of the house. So, and that just works off that. So we look at the theme first. What does the house rule? Are we talking about money and values here? Are we talking about relationships and partnerships here? And then we look at the ruling sign after that, based on looking at the energy of the planet first. If the planet's got good dignity, if it's in a sign where it's comfortable, if it needs a moment to think in order to be able to do to operate properly, with the emotions a factor in it. If emotions a factor in the way that you communicate and it's in the 10th house, you know what, that's not necessarily going to be easy for you, but you can find a style where, you know, your emotions and your instincts and your intuition become a really, really important part of your business model and the way that you make your way in the world and things like that. However, if that 10th house is a sign that's not got good dignity for your Mercury, then, you know, hey, you're going to have to go and look at those other houses probably that Mercury rules for clues on how to either work with that energy or how to, you know, start building a career that's going to be meaningful to you, because wherever you seem to be ending up right now, if you're taking it off face value, just seems to be the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, and that could be that client who keeps coming to you saying, oh, I just can't seem to find a career that works for me, you know. So, you know, look at the ruling sign. Analyze Mercury's role in that house. So we're doing that by bringing all those things together. We look at how our thinking process works, how our learning process works. Are we good at communicating with other people? And we apply it to the house and to the sign that it's all in. And we synthesize the information, so we bring it all together. We talk about that. Dignity and house modality, we've talked about that. Aspects to other planets, and this is really, really important too, especially for the way I guess I like to do astrology. If Mercury's part of a pack of planets that seem to be a major conduit of energy on your chart, then it's extremely important to pay attention to those aspects and those placements. And again, too, Mercury is an accelerator. Whatever tends to go through it, it tends to amp up and move, depending on the energy. Obviously, if it's in poor dignity or if it's in a really rigid sign, then it won't. Then what you may be experiencing is the opposite of that, but it's the same thing that we're talking about. It should be accelerating, it should be moving faster, but it's not. We're dealing with a person who may be having cognitive problems or perceptual problems, or unable to distinguish their emotions from their feelings, or their anger from their thought forms. They seem to be perpetually angry or things like that, depending on what aspects are touching that planet. And again, too, when Gianna was talking, we established that Mercury is a messenger. It's not a thing unto itself, and that Mercury is a delivery agent for other energy that's coming through. So aspects to Mercury tend to be profound from that point of view. Mercury accelerates that other energy that's coming through. It amps it up. If it's good energy, that's good news. If it's bad energy, well, that's something that needs to be worked with. When I say good and bad, I'm just talking in the most relative senses. I'm talking in terms of difficulty and ease. Look at the houses that Mercury rules as well. That's the last thing. And we just talked about that before. If Mercury's in a house and you're not able to engage in that house, and Mercury feels like it's got imposter syndrome, or it's constantly bashing its head against the walls, or you can't make sense of what's going on, then go and look at those other houses that Mercury rules. Look for clues there. Look for connections in the house. Look for the planets that are sitting in those houses too. And just again, it's our job as astrologers to go and find these things and work out a blueprint on how that's expressing. Work out how to structure a dialogue with our client where we can talk about that stuff. We can talk about the difficulty they're having in that 10th house, and maybe the opportunities or the learning opportunities, the growth opportunities that are being presented to them in other houses, you know. And at the very least, it may be, hey, well, maybe you're not so much a career person because these parts of your life keep impressing themselves on you. And I think we had that with Razi's chart when we looked at it before too. We had some questions come about other things. We had a whole bunch of empty houses. There just seemed to be an urgency somewhere else. You know what I mean? So that was a possible takeaway. You don't know till you talk to your client. But these are, you know, some suggestions on places to go to make sense of that. Does anybody have any questions? Any thing they want to add to that or share? Anybody got their own tools or methods that they like to use to engage? Yeah. Okay. How are we doing so far? Sorry.
Great. No, I was saying with Mercury or any other planet, I just learned this the other day, and I find it fascinating to see how the planet feels, is comfortable or uncomfortable, will depend on the aspect, you know,
Yes.
that it has with another planet and where the problem is. So a lot of times I will see that, like, I have Mercury in Aquarius as well, So it's
Yeah.
like it's a mutable. It's in a fixed sign, so I get obsessed very quickly, with the thinking.
Yeah.
And it's opposite Uranus. So what happens when a planet is in a sign and it's not doing well with the ruler of the sign? How do I interpret that?
If it's in a sign and it's not working well in the sign that it's in.
It's doing great things with other things, but it's not doing well with the ruler of the sign. Like I have
Oh,
Mercury.
you're in opposition to Uranus on the other side of your chart. What's your Saturn doing?
It's in the third house. He's not interested in any of that.
Okay.
Saturn, one
But-
aspect.
Yeah,
Why?
if you saw Mercury sitting in a house by itself, not connected to anything else, in my mind I get an image of somebody who talks to themselves. They're not really talking to anybody else. Okay.
Well,
Now you've got a
so,
you've got a Mercury in Aquarius. So, okay, somebody who's rational, structured in the way they like to think, and they're in opposition right now to Uranus, which is the planet of inspiration and radical change and crazy ideas and things like that. I mean, that energy describes itself beautifully. You know what I mean? And that's why I say, let's look at your Saturn. Where's your Saturn on the chart? Because Saturn's connected, is fixed a planet as you're going to get on the chart. And that may, in your third house there, that may give you, when I look at an esoteric chart, from an esoteric point of view, I look at the energy we're given and the energy that's denied us. And it sounds like you're being denied this Uranian energy in order for your Mercury to function. Do you know what I mean? So
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
My family doesn't want me to do astrology.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So you, which is ironic because that's that Uranian energy and expressing itself anyway.
In the fourth house. Yes.
Yeah.
And I've got Uranus the 10th. So it's
Yeah.
like, we don't like what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, but that's the way I look at it, especially with the personal planets. Hell, you can almost personify them. Like I said, Mercury in a planet in a house all by itself, not connected to anything else, is somebody just talking to themselves, muttering to themselves. You know what I mean? Or lost in their own world of thought and things like that. You connect it up to Neptune. Suddenly, you've got anything from somebody who's thinking in terms of belief structures, especially from things that they can't put their finger on, somebody who's faith-driven, somebody, you know what I mean, who starts from the solution and works back to the problem, because that's what faith tends to do, while intellectual thinkers tend to start from the problem and work to the solution. Faith thinkers tend to start from the solution and work backwards. So that might be how that person thinks. You know what I mean? Somebody whose Mercury is trine Jupiter has big ideas. And the houses where that plays out will tell us where those big ideas are manifesting. So just simplify, right back.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah, especially with the personal planets, it's the easiest way to do it, I think. I'm a high functioning lazy person. That's how I describe myself. So having these methods for me works. It might not work for everybody else, but Mercury especially is a gift in that regard. You know what I mean? If Mercury's and its detriment, it's probably that person who manages to alienate people. They're not afraid to talk. In fact, the talking might be the problem. They're good at it, but it just tends to alienate and drive people away. Things like that. A Mercury in its fall might be somebody who can't even open their mouth at all. Struggles to find their voice and things like that. And then we start connecting that up. Somebody with Mercury in their fall, if it was connected to Saturn, maybe they were bullied. There's a bullying influence or a fear that's connected to. And we go look at that Saturn and we find out where that fear is coming from. You know what I mean? So it's all connective. Yeah.
Yes, it is actually, because I have Saturn in the third house as a house of Mercury.
Yeah.
Everything has everything.
Yeah. Okay, but also too, that might be that Mercury in Aquarius. You like to have your facts straight, because you're probably being confronted. You know what I mean? And people are going to challenge you and things like that. So you like to have your mental house in order before you get into a conversation about something like that. You can't be that Uranian airy-fairy radical out there, standing up there, burning books and telling everybody to burn the establishment down. You're structured
I
different.
just don't talk to them.
Yeah. So Yeah, yeah. I think for personal planets especially, dialogues with Mars are really, really simple. Wherever you find Mars, working with that energy is really, really simple. Personify it. Venus is, personify it. Look at it as a person in an environment and who they're communicating with or who's communicating with them. Are they getting on? It's like Big Brother. Got all these planets all in their rooms and stuff like that, and they've got all this drama that's happening every week. So.
When you look at it like that, they become much more personable. I
They do.
really
They
like
become a
it.
lot more fun to work with too. And if it's fun for you, when you're working with a client, it's going to be fun for them too. So I'm looking for ways to do that. You can laugh about that stuff. Even if somebody's really, really struggling, you find the right persona for it and you present it in the right way. You can laugh about it. And laughter's great.
It just makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Cool. Does anybody else have
Thank you.
anything they want to add? Oh, you're welcome.
I got a question.
Okay.
So when she said that, I'm sorry, what's your name again? I hate to say she and he. What's your name? The one that was just asking
Me?
about them. Yes,
Antoinette.
Antoinette. Okay, hi, how you doing? I'm sorry. When Antoinette was asking you about the Mercury and being in a sign that didn't get along with, the first question you asked her was where was Saturn at? Why was that the first question?
Because Aquarius has two rulers, Uranus and Saturn,
Oh,
and their
okay.
energy is completely different from one another. And from an
That's
esoteric,
why you asked. I
yeah.
wanted to.
Okay. Like I said, from an esoteric point of view, I look for what we're denied and what we're allowed. You've been denied the Uranian energy. So where else on the chart are we going to see how that resolves itself? And for you, it's Saturn. It'd have to be.
Got you.
Unless that conflict between Uranus and your Mercury is super relevant. You know what I mean? And yeah, and you'd have to look at where all those other points are on the chart. Yes. So yeah. So you've been denied that in a way, or you're going to have to fight for it. You know how oppositions work. They're the worst aspect to work with. They can be. Trines can be the worst aspect to work with too. They can be just as bad. But oppositions speak for themselves. Squares, they're growth opportunities. Oppositions are just a straight off denied. You know what I mean? And you're generally looking for other points on the chart to overcome that or work around that. Or you just learn to live with it. That's the way it goes, So, yeah. Does that answer your question, Crystal?
Yeah. So you asked her that basically, I just want to confirm. You asked her that basically because the connection between Uranus and Saturn, and also because she was being denied, and Saturn is a planet of restriction, or did it strictly just have something to do with Uranus
Well, it could
and
be
Saturn?
restriction is the nature of Saturn, but also her Mercury is in Aquarius right now, which is a fixed sign, and she's probably, Uranus and Saturn are so completely opposite, but they both rule the same sign.
Right.
And as an Aquarius, we tend to be more one or the other. You get the Aquarians who are boring to listen to, and they talk slowly and they talk intellectually. They've got that sort of intellectual smugness about them and things like that. They tend to be a lot more Saturnian. I'm not knocking them. They all have their gifts and see a world that we can't. But then you get the more flamboyant, the more out there, or the more sociable, more revolutionary Aquarians. Then you're looking at Uranus on the chart. And what a relief it must have been for astrologers to find these other planets on the outside, these transpersonal planets when they came up, because suddenly, Aquarius made sense, he's an Aquarius, but he's a bit of an agitator, what's that about?
He's an agitator.
Yeah, he's an agitator. Where's that coming from? I don't see that with Saturn energy, they must have all fallen into place. God, what Scorpios, God, they must have made a lot more sense after Pluto was discovered. Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Okay, my question is answered. I understand. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Cool.
I have a question, just a quick
Yes,
question.
fire away.
When Mercury is opposite a house that it rules, essentially, like, the way that Mercury would manifest then for that individual would be like, it would be extremely challenging then, correct?
Yes and no. You don't really have opposition with houses. Houses aren't really objects. They're just sort of markers of different
Okay.
parts of our lives. But also bear in mind that when the first house is about the south, the seventh house is about partnerships. The third house is about our local environment. The ninth house is about travel, expansion, and growth. So my takeaway would be if your ruling planet is in the opposite house of the sign, then you're dealing with the higher, more expansive, or the lower and more contractive expression of that sign, of that house, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? The chart is designed to work exactly the way that it works. The lower six are personal, the higher six are more focused towards the world and things like that. So if you've got a house in the lower, but a planet in the higher, then that would describe how that energy would express. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah.
That's the way I'd interpret it. But again, too, it's case by case. You look at everything that's happening on the chart and talk to the person too, you know, and believe 50% of what they say, you know, then go 80% with what you can prove. So I'm evidence-based. Yeah. Okay, so working with aspects, this should be fairly quick, and I think it just builds off that. If Mercury's conjunct something, then it intensifies both planets. And again, to remember, Mercury is connective and then accelerative by nature. So when you conjunct it up with something, it tends to quicken it up. Same way when Crystal was talking about her fire Mercury, everybody's heart rate started to go up. Well, in the same way, Mercury has that same kind of energy too. It tends to accelerate whatever it's connected to. Even if that energy is contradictory in a way, you know, we talked about the moon tends to expand. When it expands, it tends to dissolve, you know, so you drop something, the moon on something, it tends to dissolve it out and sort of dissipate its energy out onto a larger scale. You put Jupiter next to something, it tends to grow, and it'll grow and grow and grow. In some cases where you see an out of control Jupiter on a chart, you've got some form of mental or emotional gigantism. But when you put Mercury next to something, it tends to accelerate it, speed it up. Yeah. And of course, you know, if you've got conflicting energies and things like that, then you've got some detective work to do to see exactly how that's happening. Mercury sextile something, then you've got a collaborative relationship between planets. So Mercury energy, your thought processes, the way you see things, the way you learn, the way you communicate, all of that sort of stuff is collaborating with this planet. You know what I mean? And if you want to find a place to mentally engage, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a career, whether it's a way to build up your mental stamina and things like that, then that planet that Mercury is sextile to is a go-to. Yeah. Mercury trine something, the connections are effortless. You know, the energy's flowing so easily between those two at different points on the chart. It's almost like quantum entanglement. You know what I mean? You've got two atoms in two different parts of the universe, but they're still connected to each other intrinsically. That's often how a Mercury trine will work. And again, too, you know, you look at the connective and the accelerative qualities of Mercury to understand how that might be playing out there. But that can be an extremely beneficial placement on a chart. Anything that Mercury is trying to is probably going to be running at a faster pace than the other planets around it. Does anybody want to add anything or have any questions about that? Okay. When Mercury is quincunx something, there's adjustment and compromise. We need to change the way that we're thinking about the things that it's connected to. We need to adjust our thinking model or whatever in order for it to be efficient. We're not going to get it straight up off the bat there. And in terms of negotiating or discussing or working with this energy, we're going to have to make compromises in order to be able to get the most out of the situation. A Mercury square, we're going to be challenged by it and we're going to be pressured by it. It's going to conflict with the way that you think. It's going to challenge the way that you think, but it's probably, if you give it the opportunity, it's also going to evolve the way that you think, and it's going to change the way that you think. Squares, some of the most, for the Stoics out there like me, people with strong Saturn on their chart and things like that, squares are where the opportunities tend to lie. So a square to Mercury shows a growth opportunity. You're going to have pressure, you're going to be challenged by it constantly, but it will be a growth opportunity. It's not the sort of challenge you can overcome, but it's the sort of challenge that you can allow to evolve you and to change you. Quite often when you see a square to Mercury, the way that you're thinking about the problem or the situation or things like that may not be working for you. And you can't bluster or bullshit or negotiate your way past it. You need to understand what you're working with, and you need to allow it to change you and work with it. But you also need to be scrupulous while you're doing it as well. At no point will you be surrendering power or giving up or anything like that. You need to be mentally present while it's happening as well. And when Mercury is opposite something, and we were just talking about this before, we've got conflict and polarity, and often oppositions are the most difficult placements to work with. They're almost Plutonian in that they don't tend to be energy you can negotiate with. You've got to find workarounds. You've got to find different ways to get that energy moving, or you've got to find a way to live with things the way that they are. The best thing about Mercury is when Mercury's involved, Mercury's a solution seeker and a problem solver by its very nature. So once we start paying attention to different parts of the chart, we'll start finding solutions if we want to find them. We need to look for connections. We need to do detective work. But that situation itself, I'm not saying that it's hopeless. I'm just saying there's probably more efficient and more rewarding ways to solve that problem than taking it head on. Yeah. And if a client's coming to you and that opposition is something that's presenting itself, then we're going beyond concessions. We're looking for solutions. We're looking for jury-rigged solutions that allow us to safely and healthily express that energy in other houses, with other signs, with other planets, yeah, and take advantage of other strengths that we have on there. Quite often the best place to look is just whatever's making a positive aspect to that Mercury for a start. It's a great place to start, and in the absence of that, then look at the houses that it rules, you know, the signs. Does anybody have any questions about that? Cool. Okay. Mercury retrograde. Natal Mercury retrograde. Has anybody got a retrograde Mercury on their chart?
I do.
Okay, that's so interesting. How do you guys experience that?
I don't know. It's in my 12th house in Leo. I'm not sure how that works. I really don't. I know I talk to myself a lot. I think, you know, I meditate, I do things like that. So I really don't know. I'm not really good at the whole retrograde thing in the natal chart. I can do it better through transits, but not in a natal chart. So yeah. I'm not really sure.
Okay. Yeah, there's a connection often between the two. My daughter has got Mercury retrograde in her natal chart, and often her transits and things like that are often the opportunities that she's looking for to work with that. And for a lot of people, hers is in a water sign too. It's in Scorpio, so she tends to internalize a lot, and she tends to, you know what I mean. There's the obvious discomfort with talking to other people. By the way, if you've got Mercury in the 12th house in Leo and you're talking to yourself a lot, Crystal, there's a high chance you're going to end up in an institution or something like that. So I'd be worried of that.
So basically, I'm in the right place, right?
You're in the right place.
That's what
you're in the right group, I think, too. Be careful with that.
My Sun, Mercury, and Venus is there.
Okay.
That is funny.
Yeah. That's we're gonna have to do your chart sometime too. Anything with the 12th house I'm fascinated by. It's that 12th house still stumps me. I still find it hard to work with. And that's one of you really got to detach. I've got to detach from the most and step right back to work with. But yeah.
Yeah, well, actually it's in a Placidus chart, but when I go to the whole chart, it puts me everything in the first house. But I have a stellium, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, and the Sun, but Jupiter's in my first house, and the other three planets go into the 12th house in Placidus, and they're all in Leo.
Yeah.
So I know I like to tell stories, though. I'm a really good storyteller and a good writer. So I love to talk. So I'm not really sure, but I'm not really good at, like, I could write a book and I won't publish it or anything. You know what I mean? I won't take it to the next level. So it's kind of, I don't know how I would interpret that. I really don't.
One thing you said right from the beginning is when you do a reading for somebody else, they can be more confused by the end of it, and the end can be quite long.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just going to go
Absolutely.
out on a limb and say maybe that's what's happening right at that time. So that
True
might
that.
be at least at the straight off in a face value way there, because you are digging so deep. I know when you and you do a lot of detective work and you move really, really quickly. That's that Mercury at work there.
Yeah.
Um,
The
but you might be
research
moving so
goddess.
fast you're leaving your audience behind while you're doing that.
Yeah.
And then with that 12th house energy, you know, they might be sitting thinking, you know what, she might be crazy. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, that's a possibility. What about you,
Yes,
Antoinette?
sir.
How's your Mercury retrograde working or not working?
I'm laughing because I'm Pisces. So I'm
Okay.
wherever Pisces is a 12. So I have to laugh.
In the which house, sorry? Oh, good Lord. Which house is it
She
in?
said,
Ooh.
Your the
Yeah,
second house?
so the 5th house. Pisces.
The 5th house. Okay. Oh, wow. Wow.
So
Okay.
that's why I enjoy these classes. You're making me laugh.
Okay. And you're able to make that work for you? You're comfortable with it? Does it cause problems for you?
Listen, you're not that deep, but I do the best I can, right? Because I was about to ask you, I have the sun, Mercury conjunct Chiron, conjunct the sun,
Okay. Wow.
conjunct South Node.
I think again too, we're gonna have to come back have a look at that chart. That's a
Yeah,
lot. You've brought this up
it look
before,
very
yeah.
easy, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you've brought that one up before. That's a really interesting one to unpack. I don't think I've got the mental stamina to hold all of those balls
No,
in the
I
air at
don't want
once
to.
and
I'm
then
not sure I
sprinkle
want
some
to
retrograde
choke
on
up.
top. Yeah.
Let me tell you, Mercury is the ruler of my North Node, and
Okay.
it's retrograde. So I'm everything that I learn, I have to learn it in my way. Like you can teach me
Good.
something,
Okay.
I'm gonna come back again and do it my way. Like
Yeah.
I have to do all my courses twice.
Okay. Okay.
Like repeat.
Great. That's that Mercury and Aquarius too, isn't it? Yeah, you're gonna have to work for your endorphins rather than enjoy your dopamine, you know? Yeah, you're gonna have to ground everything that you learn and work with that Saturnian approach to it. You're gonna have to work for it. You're not gonna get epiphanies the same way that other people
No,
might.
I gotta
Yeah,
work
you've got to
fast.
really want it. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. At least you
Saturn
got, in that regard, at least you got Saturn on your side there. That's the perfect partner for that. Yeah. What about you, Michael? And how's your Mercury retrograde working or not working for you?
I don't really notice anything out of the ordinary except for I don't really have a lot of problems during Mercury retrograde. Actually, I tend to do better. When I sit down to write, it's a little easier. So the things that other people struggle with during Mercury retrograde, I have the opposite. I tend to thrive under Mercury retrograde.
Okay. You've got a very strong Saturn on your chart, though, and Saturn is
Oh
the
yeah.
obstacle is the way. So, but also too, maybe the retrograde for you is the ability to block out white noise. Maybe it's not as connective as it could be. You know, you don't get
Saturn's
over.
retrograde too.
Okay.
Saturn's retrograde too up in the 9th house of
Mm.
Cancer. So in that yod. So
Yeah.
that may be why.
Okay. That makes sense. That's cool.
Well, that's
Okay. Okay, so people with Mercury retrograde could be introspective thinkers, even if they're outgoing in the way that they talk to other people. They might have their own internal dialogues going constantly, and they, you know what I mean? It's directed at themselves. The way that they think is not brash and bold and externalizing out there. So that's a possible way that it could express. Can anybody confirm that? We've got such big personalities in the group. I find that difficult to believe. But here we go. Probably the biggest personality of them all putting their hand up. That's a good sign.
There's always an internal dialogue going on. I'm
All the
literally
time.
always
Yeah.
Always in a conversation with myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Internalize
Yeah.
everything.
It's the song I sing with my daughter. If you're happy and you know it, overthink. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree.
Yep.
Mhm.
If you're happy and you know it, then you know you're going to blow it. If you're happy and you know it, overthink.
Yeah, right.
You sing that to your daughter?
Oh, we sing it together. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
I
my wife
love
and
that.
daughter are chronic overthinkers. Me,
Yeah,
I'm
that
just
is so cool.
yeah, I'm
Now
good.
that's a new one. Now that's going to go into a file. So now I'll catch
And it's
myself
going
when
to be
I'm
like an
overthinking.
MP3 file that's just going to play constantly in your
It's
head
going to
now.
play.
Well, you know, when you go to sleep, you'll be overthinking and listening to that song. You're
Maybe
welcome.
that'll make me stop overthinking. If I can hear that song play, it'll
It
give me
won't.
the idea that
Okay.
okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. So we've confirmed that one. They may also be an indirect communicator, so they may not. People who you ask them a question and they say something different, you know, that's so loosely connected that you're going to have to ask questions and do detective work in order to be able to understand the answer and things like that. Generally, that's the experience of any husband who's been, you know, who's married. But it can be, you know, it can also happen out there in the big world too. So people who don't communicate directly. So that's why I don't know if we can confirm that here. I don't think so. We all
I was
seem
about to
be,
say, I'm very direct when I communicate. That's the only
you've
thing
got no problems with that.
Yeah.
You're a natural direct communicator. It might also be the opposite too. Maybe you're a little blunt, a little riding over the top of
Yeah.
people. You wouldn't even know it. Sometimes that can happen too, depending on the sign that it's in. So you just take that
Yeah, and it could
energy.
be my Jupiter and my Sun is conjuncted too, so that could have a lot to
Okay.
do with it.
And what are they in?
Mhm.
They're in Leo, did you say?
They're in Leo, going from the first to the 12th house. Like my Jupiter starts in the first house, and the other
Yeah.
three planets is in the 12th. But in the whole sign, in the whole the equal house chart, they're all in the first house. But in the Placidus, it's in the 12th and the first.
Okay. Well,
But I resonate more
sometimes,
with the Placidus.
yeah, okay. Well, that's fair enough.
Mhm.
Sometimes I remember in the introductory course, I did keywords for each of the signs, and sometimes in each of the planets, sometimes retrograde can be as simple as either you're choosing from column A or you're choosing from column B. You're not choosing from both. Some people retrograde works for them. You know, we've seen some people where retrograde's taken the edge off things, and especially in an esoteric chart, sometimes you've got a planet that could be unruly, or smothering, or limiting, or overpowering, and retrograde just seems to take that edge off. You know, and you only learn this when you're talking to the client. We've had this come up again and again and again in a lot of the chart readings we've done in our groups, where retrograde can actually work for you. But again, too, sometimes we don't see the hard work that got the person to that point as well. You know, they could have been bashing their head against the world the whole time until, you know, they started growing and learning and things like that. And here we are. You know, blunt communication can be just as much a gift from retrograde as indirect communication too.
Agree.
The way that we process information can certainly be affected by retrograde. There may be places that the mind never goes to, you know, like autism, some forms of autism on the spectrum. You know, they don't even realize whole areas of human perception exist in the way that they form their thoughts and things like that. That might be an example of how retrograde can work. It may also be a struggle to organize information in the person's mind. It can be a struggle to form words or find the right words and things like that too. So there are ways that can express. Does anybody have that? I don't think so. We all seem so eloquent in this situation.
I've been asked if I was autistic.
Okay. Yeah.
It's funny how once you become, the older you get, the more interested you are. And it's like my brother, may he rest in peace. He said to me a couple of years ago, you know, I swear I think I have ADD.
I do. I've been diagnosed with ADHD.
Well, we didn't know, our parents didn't know, because back then it was like there was some stigma attached to mental health.
Absolutely.
And if you had something, you were not taken to see the doctor because, you know, small town, everybody's gonna find out she's got a problem.
Right. Yeah. Mm.
But it was also a lot simpler back then too. ADD, ADHD, there wasn't even a distinction between the two. And then when you get to ADHD, there's 8 different types of ADHD now. It can be anything from somebody who explodes at the drop of a hat to somebody who becomes hyper obsessed about something. There's different variations of it too. It's a lot more evolved. It's funny, as I get older, I start to wonder myself if I've got some of this. I know I'm on the spectrum.
Yeah, me
I've
too.
got other family members.
I really
Everybody's
do.
nodding their heads. Just like, yeah.
I think we all
Um,
are actually.
Okay, all right. But I'm starting to wonder about ADD as well, or ADHD. It could simply be I really struggle to focus. I can go through whole periods I cannot focus on a thing, and then
Yeah.
suddenly I'm hyper focused about something. I'll be obsessed about it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. So we didn't know that much about back then. Back then it was just suck it up. You're not working hard enough. Nobody cares. You're not generally you're not working or trying hard enough. Was that hard work will overcome anything.
That was written on the report card. You can do better.
Yeah, that's right. So suck it up. That was the generally the dialogue back then.
Can I just offer a slightly different perspective on it? Because
Yes.
I don't know whether it's my Mercury or my Jupiter and Gemini, but I tend to have I look at it and I go, we're all just human beings and we all operate differently, and every single chart tells us that. It's like, we pull from different places, and then we're all supposed to fit into this one size fits all system that doesn't actually allow for most of that. And so then we create a whole spectrum of what falls outside of that, and then diagnose people with being wrong. And I'm like, no, we're just humans having a different experience. We can't all have the same experience, because then we wouldn't be humans.
That's right.
There's a lot to unpack from what you just said, Sandra. One of them is I believe we're all going back to the same source, but we're all in different places. So for me, that's the unifying principle. 2, the thing that made me fall in love with astrology is you can have all of these differences and all of these variations on personality and the soul and the spirit and the way we think and all of that stuff, and it all elegantly fits onto one platform. Astrology will support all of it. It's the only platform I've found that can do that. You look at psychology, conventional psychology, it's split up into different groups and they're all factualized. They're not connected to one another. A lot of them are concordantly opposite to one another. And things like that, and all that creates between them is division. Science is changing all the time, the scientific method. You've got to give it to them for that. I agree with it, but I agree with what you're saying. At the end of the day, the one thought that I took on that made life so much easier for me to live, especially living with other people, was the understanding that we're all doing the best that we can with what we've got at any given time, and that in the times that I've had the greatest struggle with other people. That's brought out the worst sides of me. It's always been the thing that's been allowed me to unclench my grip and let go of what's happening. This person that I'm having a problem with, they're the best version of themselves right now they know how to be. And I'm the best version of myself that I know how to be right now too. So I completely understand and agree with what you're saying. And I think society's become so obsessed with differences. It always has been, but I mean, that's just the way it's. And the thing that has brought me to astrology, and I'm a skeptic and a cynic and all of those things, has been how elegantly it supports all ideas in one place and brings them together. Even things that aren't supposed to go together somehow work. And we've been talking about it all night. How to get these things that don't normally go together, how to work with them and work around on things like with things like that. No, medication has never once come up in the dialogue. Suck it up has never been part of what we've talked about. You know what I mean? We've got tools here that we can work with. The best part is, and the easiest part of it is, we can actually stand back and have a look at it all sitting there presented in front of us and talk about it. We can come back in 10 years later and look at the same chart and talk about it in a completely different way. I don't know anything else that can do that. So
it is actually a really beautiful approach to understanding who we are, to understanding humans in general. It's because it's all encompassing as opposed to trying to restrict any particular aspect.
That's right. you've got this thing happening in schools now where they've got landmarks. By a certain age, the person should be able to do this. By a certain age, they should be able to do that. You know, that's frankly bullshit. You know, we're not doing,
Yeah.
we're not.
I because I homeschool and so I allowed my son to start reading when it felt right for him. I didn't actually teach him how to read.
Okay.
Because I'd done research on the fact that, you know, all of the pieces in your brain just fit together at a particular time, which is unique to you.
Yeah.
And it just happens. And then you start learning to read, and within 2 weeks, you're up to the same level as everybody else in your
Yeah.
age group. And that's exactly what happened. He waited until he
Yeah.
waited till he was 11. We gave him a little nudge. We said, look, we'll pay you to read for 20, to try to read for 20 minutes every day. Within 2 weeks, he was like, I'm loving this. And he was reading chapter books from not even engaging in it before that. So, you know, it
He's an Aquarius, though, isn't he?
he is an Aquarius.
So he's already awesome. So there's that. But I agree with you too. And the discussion always seems to be, especially in the last few decades, is how much control do we give to the child? How much responsibility do we assign to the parent? And that's a sliding scale. It's going back and forth. That really seems to be what the dialogue's about. It's not the content, you know. Mind you, that being said, has anybody seen this new math? My God. So most complicated way to solve simple problems we used to know how to solve back in school, you know. Of course, you also had a nun standing over you with a stick motivating you. But, you know, we survived, didn't we?
We did. We had to pull it.
Yeah. The good old days, you know, we're still in that generation, but I'm convinced that would solve 80% of our behavioral issues. Whether I'm right or wrong. Natural Mercury retrograde tends to reflect on the past. This is an interesting fact I read somewhere. And look, I don't have retrograde Mercury, so I can neither confirm or deny this. Even without having retrograde Mercury, but because of my Mercury placement, I have a tendency to reflect on stuff that happened, God, even when I was a kid, and I still cringe about it sometimes. So I can only imagine what that might be like for retrograde Mercury. Does anybody have that experience with our retrograde Mercuries in the group?
Yes,
Yeah.
the past.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
It may be the way you experience time too. I don't know if time's more fluid rather than segregated. I guess I don't know if you can confirm that, but these are speculations from my point of view.
No, my Mercury is kind of, well, they say I have it at 29 degrees, so they call it the anaretic degrees, so it's kind of stress, you know.
Okay.
And opposite Mercury, opposite Uranus.
Okay.
And beside Chiron. So it's kind of stressing. But I think that the whole learning process for me, the whole learning process was stressing because it, like you said, Sandra, it had to be a certain way and everybody had to do it that way. That just was not my way.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so you got fear built into it too. Yeah.
Yeah, I should have repeated. I don't remember what grade it was, and I didn't get the chance. So I kind of lost track. I should have been, you know, but in those days to repeat meant more money for your parents. So they just tried to keep it moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
Unconventionally expressive too. And I think I can at least confirm that much for Mercury retrogrades. So they've got different ways of expressing themselves, different ways of talking, different ways of thinking. Sometimes they see a different world around them, you know, different to the one that the rest of us see. So that may be a way that it manifests.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, I always felt more comfortable in an era that I was not born in. Like I feel more comfortable. I was a teenager and I was dressing like I was 40 years old. Long skirts, just everything, all felt good to me. I don't know how to explain it.
There's your Saturn again. Your Saturn's exerting itself. Yeah. And you're anachronistic. You know, you're living in a time outside the time that you're in. So that's an expression of that Mercury retrograde energy too. But if you're dressing older than the way you are, that's definite Saturn energy right there.
Okay.
So you've already been doing that. You've already been working with the Saturn side of your Aquarius Mercury rather than the Uranus side. Otherwise, you would have been turning up in punk outfits or whatever. I don't know, whatever the
That's
fashion
true.
was at the time.
But that's never gonna happen.
I was a punk in high
Always.
school and a goth, so
Yeah.
putting that out there. I don't know if that improves my stock or drops it any, but
That's awesome.
yeah. An avoidant personality too, that might be a trait that we're looking at with Mercury. So you know what I mean? They tend to avoid stuff, they tend to avoid problems, they tend to avoid conversations, they tend to discourage themselves from thinking about things that they don't want to think about. You know what I mean? They tend to block things out, that information that's coming in, or thoughts that are coming up, or feelings that are rising. They can avoid that, avoid situations where those things might be triggered too. So that can be an expression of that. I don't know if anybody has those tendencies. I don't know if we got the privilege of being avoidant with our generation. But yeah, it's certainly on the table now. I know that. Just nobody's doing it. Everybody's talking at the moment. At this age, you can't shut them up. That's the problem. So,
But it's talking.
does anybody have anything they want to add to that, or any thoughts on that too that might expand on that?
That's great information. That's going to help a lot when I do my readings.
Okay.
The avoidant, I find more the avoidant is like from Aquarius, or is
Okay.
Mercury also, depends on where he is or she is. So
I think Aquarius, I don't know if Aquarius is so much avoidant as above. They tend to exist in a space above what's going on around them. It's a fixed in the air sign, so you tend to live in a world above everybody else. No, and I don't mean that in a metaphorical sense. They just tend to live in the world of thought. So I think being avoidant and distant and remote, that's part and parcel of Aquarius. But I guess potentially you've got a double dose of that. I don't know if that's the way it's manifested for you. You seem very, very connected. Yeah.
I've heard them speak about Uranus as where we have the Akashic records.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's
Well,
why Mercury, like, it's the higher octave of Mercury.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's like, that's what they call, I've heard it said. Yes.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, you know, that's where we channel from.
Okay. And you've been denied that this lifetime. Isn't that interesting to process? No, I'm talking about that opposition you've got on your chart. At least from a Mercury point of view, you've been denied that. So
In past life, probably.
yeah, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, this is
I'm
last little
interested to
section.
know,
Sorry.
sorry, I'm interested to know, do you actually feel like you have the capacity to channel based on what was just said?
Yes, I do. And I didn't realize
do.
it for a long time. That's part of what you said. I thought I was just talking to myself. But somebody asked my teacher, my astrologer, does she channel? And he says, all the time, every day. He answered for me, you know, according to. So, yeah.
Because I've read recently a different theory on the opposition, is that, you know, they're both pretty powerful aspects in your chart, and it's like that theory of the axis is your mission is to balance them both. So you do actually have access to those two energies, and they're both big, and so it's like getting to that middle ground with it. I don't know if you know, it's just something I read recently, and I kind of thought, oh, I do like that because it's a bit more empowering.
Yes,
You're
I like
absolutely
that.
right, and I don't want to create the impression that I keep using the word denied. And when I say denied, I'm talking about a direct connection between the two. Of course, there's workarounds and there's different ways to. You're forced to, you know, you're forced to find other solutions and things like that. But these two will not play well together. You need to find other ways to alleviate that and work with that and develop strengths in the chart. And that, from that point of view, can be just as, like I said, trines can be the worst aspects on the chart. When energy flows too easily, you take it for granted. Some people with a lot of trines on their chart, they never achieve anything because everything's given to them. They don't have to go any further than they can reach because everything's, as soon as they put their hand out, life puts something in it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
Mm.
it's all comes down to how the how the aspect manifests on the chart. Oppositions can be tremendously rewarding, and I think the T-square for anybody who's willing to do the work is a great aspect. It's powerful. We see it come up again and again in this group. It's rare we don't find a chart that has a T-square on it, and those opportunities that they provide are incredibly important. So I 100% say I agree with what you're saying, Sandra. It's getting those two planets to play nicely with each other, though. Generally, there's more rewarding ways to work with those planets rather than trying to make them work together, because they just naturally don't want to, you know. And
No,
from a
but it's always
karmic point of view, that opens a can of worms. I think that opens a whole dialogue why that might be the way. From an esoteric point of view, I think oppositions are probably some of the most telling ones you can get, especially when it's to the big three. And especially when it's to the moon, because what that means is this, you know what, whatever that's connected to that moon is being denied that old life stuff, but there will still be enough good stuff from that moon energy that we need to bring into this lifetime. So we need to go do some detective work to find out where that is, you know. Yeah. So sorry if I've given the impression that I think that as soon as the opposition turns up, you know, just give up. That's not what I'm saying.
No, no, not at all. It just makes more sense how you explained it there. Really makes a lot of sense. So thanks for that.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. I don't want to give that impression. Yeah. Okay. One last little section. Manifesting Mercury. If you're struggling to work with your Mercury, or you want to get more of your money's worth out of your Mercury too, there's little things you can do that might just make life a little easier for you in that regard. Wednesday is Mercury's day. So if you want to do some writing, if you've got writer's block, if you want to open yourself up to Mercury energy, Wednesday's a great day to do it. Of course, you can do it any day of the week, but if you're really struggling with it, or you want to get more out of it, then Wednesday, especially, is a good day to, if you want to write something and you're having trouble focusing, then make Wednesday your sit down day and at least do an hour. You know, and you get that habit going, and you find other habits will start forming around it. I say that to myself too. I'm terrible at that. If you're maybe a shrine or an altar, even just a little thing around your house, a visual thing that you look at every time you pass by it, it'll anchor something in you, you know, and focus you back onto working with this energy and things like that. It could be something simple, sitting in your kitchen or something like that. Anything that's yellow and green is connected to the planet Mercury. So put that on your shrine or your altar. Wear those colors. If you're sitting down and you've still got writer's block and things like that, who knows, they might stimulate some part of your brain and get things going. But you're consciously, when you put those things on and you sit down, you're invoking Mercury energy. So that might be something that you want to incorporate. Communication tools, anything from, okay, how counterintuitive this can be too. That mobile device that you've got in your pocket or sitting on your desk right there is a Mercury device. So that, you know, when you're working with that, you're certainly working with Mercury. If you're chatting and messaging other people, then that's fine too. It can also be the biggest distracting tool in your life as well. But any communication tool pays homage to Mercury, connects you to Mercury. A phone, a screen, you know, all these digital things that we've got now, anything that engages you in conversation with people, some sort of device that helps you, a headset, a microphone, all of these things are all connected to Mercury. Travel items, something you might want to put on your shrine, put a map on there, put a compass on there, some sort of item, put a plane ticket to somewhere you want to go that you've already been, a stub. Put it on there. You know, if you're trying to manifest some Mercury energy, you want to travel somewhere, and you know, why wouldn't you? I mean, when you're working with Mercury, you're working with travel, you're working with solutions and puzzle solving, you're working with money. If you want to manifest yourself a trip somewhere, get a map of the Bahamas or a map of you know, Czechoslovakia or Hungary or whatever, and put that on your shrine. And you know, it's like a wish board. I don't know, anybody still using a wish board? You know, it's, yeah, there you go. It's another expression of that, you know, that lifts it up to another level too. It's something you could put on your board too. Put a map of where you want to go and put a circle on the city that you want to visit, you know, and that's inviting Mercury energy into your life to start moving mountains quietly behind the scenes and open doorways for you, because Mercury is a psychopomp. Remember, it can move between worlds and things like that. So invite that energy.
Oh, I'm getting you. Who is it in this group that works with tarot? Is it that you, Sandra? Or is it Adrian?
Adrian.
Not me.
Adrian not here today. Well, here's the magician. So this is like he's got a shrine,
Yeah.
and he can activate any element. But tomorrow is the 21st. Is the sun enters Cancer, so that we have solstice.
Yep.
So usually what you can do is you can light a candle and put that on your little chat in the area where Cancer is, and you can manifest from the Cancer area.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. You sound like you're revved up and ready there too. I saw you like you got struck by lightning.
Get ready to see what I was gonna do tomorrow. Yeah, it was.
Awesome.
And
awesome.
This is Mercury. Actually. The tarot. This is Mercury. And he's
That
manifesting.
card is about duality as well. Above, as above, so below, the mudra for it. So, you know, it's about bringing those two energies together as a conduit. I read something fascinating about the magician, and that they don't really understand the power they wield. You know, they're just a conduit for it. And that way, they're a pure expression of Mercury energy. Mercury, Thoth is an expression of Mercury, the god. And he's the god of magic and mathematics and all of that sort of stuff. So it all connects somehow. But there's a duality inherent in that card. Yeah. Citrine, agate, tiger's eye. Those three stones, they're the birthstones connected to Mercury. So, you know, hey, put something like that on your shrine. Put something like that on your board and things like that. And again, to you, just inviting that energy into your world.
Did you say citrine and tiger's eye?
Yeah, and agate as well. And lastly, lavender and peppermint. They're those scents, those aromas that just trigger the mind, that refresh and reboot your mind, especially when you're all foggy and things like that too. That connects to Mercury. And eucalyptus is in there as well. Eucalyptus oil, any of those oils, things like that too. They're generally oils that you use for mental clarity and things like that. And that's not by mistake, it's by design. It's connected to Mercury energy. So if you've got a oil burner or one of those, what do they call them, those misters in your house, maybe you want to put some of that energy there too if you're trying to get a creative flow going and get some creative energy happening in your world.
It's so interesting that you said that because, as I mentioned before, my chart ruler is Mercury and I get very bad headaches a lot. And the only thing that seems to actually help me from like a non-medical route, which I try to avoid at all costs, is peppermint oil.
Okay.
Which I know that's obviously not just specific to me,
here.
but yeah, right here.
But relevant. It sounds super relevant though. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good feedback. Yeah. That's awesome. Anybody else have any add-ons to that or any experiences that they want to share or things like that? That's me. That's it for today. I've got 3 charts there with some aspects to Mercury and things like that, but it's up to you guys whether we go through those or not. We've come through quite a lot. We've certainly got our a good run for our time, and everybody's energized at the end of it. I can see a few yawns every once in a while, but we all seem to be present, and you know, so I take that as a positive. So yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. That's Mercury, the modern astrology, Damien McKinnon representation of that. So thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for everybody's thoughts and experiences and stuff. And thanks for the laughs. I always enjoy the laughs, probably more than anything. I remember that. Keeps the energy going.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, take care.
I enjoyed
Bye.
it.
It's good to
You
see
too.
you guys.
You
No
too.
worries.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
See you later, everyone. Next group.
Bye.
Will do. All right, I'm gonna
Okay.
pause this.